In most rare cancers, it takes a very, very long time to reach endpoints in clinical trials. If you thought about a pediatric brain cancer like a typical teratoid rhabdoid tumor, that's a very rare tumor, 50 or 60 cases per year. The last clinical trial that was done started about 10 years ago, just published last year with incomplete results. That's way too long for a child or a family to wait for negative results. That makes no sense. To be forward-thinking and strategic, we created working groups that are disease-specific, with the entire focus of a group to think about the translational nature of that disease. What makes it tick? How do you make it better? What does it take to get the resources to develop a better therapy? So the endpoint's always the same. It's translation of information into a clinical trial. That's the very simple rule of a working group. You come together to develop a clinical trial. It's really been a great experience. One of the things that has been most enlightening to me is we've incorporated both basic scientists, clinical scientists, the bioinformatics people, but also patient stakeholders and foundations that all meet on a regular basis to talk and to think about the disease that we're trying to cure, essentially, at least improve. And every one of those stakeholders has something very important to say about what's going on, and they all contribute to that final product of the clinical trial. And to me, I think it's been really enlightening to see how rapidly that information is translated into a clinical trial. We've had a medulloblastoma working group, for instance, that almost immediately resulted in 2 clinical trials that were approved by stakeholders that we never would have gotten funding for. So the clinicians felt empowered, the families felt empowered, the scientists were delighted that they had something that they could bring forward from their labs that resulted in a clinical trial that was meaningful. So it's been a really, really wonderful experience, and I think it's rare.
What are the results of your working group so far?
So we started the working groups about 2.5 years ago. It would have taken us probably 4 or 5 years to develop a clinical trial if we got the funding. By having everybody in the same virtual room, however, we had an idea, and that trial got funded in about 1.5 years. It's awesome. So yeah, that's one example. We have other examples just like that. We have a group that's focused just on diffuse midline glioma that has many labs across the globe, actually. And we have 2 major clinical trials that have come out of that, funded by philanthropy. And not only that, we have industry that's interested. And this is really an important point because it's rare to find any kind of industry partner who's willing to contribute their drug into a rare disease setting. But we found 3 companies willing to do that in one of these particular trials. So that's also a unique strategy that we've been able to exploit.
You're engaging institutions to make the whole group more powerful.
Yes,
is that correct?
That's correct. That's exciting. And I think anybody who's in those working groups will tell you exactly that. They like to get on those Zoom calls because they know they're contributing to something that's really important. I think for oligodendroglioma, the idea was to create a similar environment where we would partner with the foundation, Oligo Nation. We would bring together scientists that were both clinicians and laboratory scientists and data scientists, and we would create the infrastructure. And to me, the infrastructure would include core groups. So you would have a preclinical core group. You would have a data informatics group. You would have a clinical core group. And then you would have, coming off of those core groups, you would have laboratories doing research that would all, again, funnel into the ultimate product, which would be a clinical trial. So I think with that kind of structure, you would have the same sort of success, I think, that we've seen with our working groups. But the difference here is that there's more resources. In our working group, we don't have as much resources as I'm anticipating that we're going to have with Oligo Nation. And that kind of resource is going to actually move things a lot faster. I can't see anything but success coming from that. For this particular project, we're going to work with the Children's Brain Tumor Network, which has the largest biorepository of pediatric and young adult brain tumors. But more importantly, what they have is a structure to look at data. For oligodendroglioma, what we need to do is create this registry repository data set of knowledge that's cloud-based, that's virtual, that is accessible, and is freely shared, so that scientists who hear about what we're doing and start to think, I may want to join that group, will join, right? Because then I think we're going to go that much faster. We'll keep feeding that into that system, and it'll keep feeding us back. And you always have to be looking at the data in an iterative way. And I think that's why the more people that look at the information, talk about the information, think about the information, share the information, the more likely it is that you're going to find answers that are positive answers. I truly believe that they should join us. Because if they're a participant, an active participant, then I think they'll see the inner workings of how a project like this works. And they can actually contribute in a meaningful way. The FDA is very agreeable now to letting us use real-world data, not even as a surrogate, but actually as true data, as synthetic controls for our trials. And this is a very important point because we don't have to have 600 patients to come to an endpoint. We could have 40 or 50 patients in our protocol, but then have 300 patients where we have really good synthetic control data that informs that clinical trial. So all of a sudden, we've shortened the time frame. So I think patients and families should feel energized by the possibility that they are a part of the solution, and they could be optimistic about the future, because I think it's going to be high energy, and it's going to be good energy, and I think people will be very happy about it.